Hi and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce and I'm glad you're here. We've got some different things than ever before today, and we've got some things similar to prior things, so grab some coffee, get your tea. Okay, so early in the week, as today's show was taking shape, having mentioned the topic already more times than I ever originally imagined, there was no way we were touching weather today. But the old adage, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, proved again why it is axiomatic. So even though I must largely agree with Mark Twain, who famously said, everyone talks about the weather but no one ever does anything about it, I must also keep in mind Count Basie, who at the end of April in Paris on the recording said, one more time. He actually said that several times. What happened, especially in light of last week's show, makes the topic unavoidable. So, I've spoken last week of weather and computer modeling of weather. Well, here, we all woke up Tuesday to 1 to 3 inches of snow, and models or not, nobody saw it coming. Monday night's forecast mentioned no snow, but that was only a taste of what was to come. That this part of the country might see snow overnight Wednesday into Thursday was known for days. But it became funny. Even during Wednesday morning's forecast, they were admitting they didn't know how much to predict because, wait for it, the models wouldn't agree. And they showed the different inch totals by model. It was true. One had as little as 1 inch for my area, and another had as many as 8 or 9. For the record, I got 5, and it was a wet, heavy snow, but inasmuch as it was around freezing early in the day and then went over 40, it started to melt quickly, and that relieved worries that branches might take out power lines. So, here's a thought. Maybe the folks at Madden Football ought to start a division for weather. You may recall, they not only had the winner for the Super Bowl, they even perfectly nailed the score. Just saying. At least here, I am comforted by the fact that historically my lawn needs its first haircut in mid-March, and if I don't get to it by the 3rd week, it really looks awful. That's not exactly all true. It does look awful. But see, the grass doesn't wake up by then. It's the weeds. They become the most vengeful organisms on the planet, and they take it out on me and on the lawn. So yeah, the lawn does look awful, but it's got nothing to do with grass, that's for sure. The Oscars were last week. Did you watch? And did the movies you want to win? I watched the tribute introduced by Meryl Streep. It was lovely. And of course it was followed by the images of those who have left us over the past year. But I've not been able to figure out how the sequence of those images was determined. It wasn't ladies first because that went back and forth and not exactly alternating. Then I thought maybe it would be alphabetical order. That would be fair. But that was quickly disproved. I thought then maybe it would be in the order in which they left us. But that wasn't it. Louis Jourdan wasn't near the end, and he died, what, only 2 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure it wasn't how brightly their star once shone. To even attempt that would only cause contradictory opinion. That's the last thing that a remembrance of this sort ought to generate. So maybe they just pulled the names from a hat. The awards themselves I have no opinion on. I've seen none of the films. DVDs and streaming have forever spoiled me from going to a movie theater. It's just far too convenient to watch at home. Pause if you want to, finish it the next day, the day after that. Maybe entirely leave it if it's a bad film. My snacks are a lot less expensive too. But I am glad for the Oscars. They bring to my attention what films I'll be looking for soon. Remember, you can write to us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com. And remember, too, you can see all the previous shows at tinyurl.com/BruceChannel. All right, so 2 viewers, full disclosure, they're longtime friends. 2 viewers wrote to ask about the jacket I wore during last week's show. I was asked, hey, is that the old Peas coat? The answer is yes. Now, I started playing professionally while still in high school. The group was named Goober's Peas, and in those days, the members of a band dressed the same. I wasn't in high school yet, but think of the old footage you've seen of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, all wearing matching suits. So, in the band I was in, our first matching threads were these coats, worn with black pants, black tie, sometimes a black vest. I have here an old photograph of that band wearing these coats, and although I must say the quality of this picture makes it not just look old, but Civil War old, like a daguerreotype. So if you've been watching us here and have seen the promotions for my book, I say that for most of my adult life, I was the same size as when in high school, and it's true. Now, while at my personal high, I likely would not have been able to get this over both shoulders, let alone button it. But, as you saw last week, I am able to now. At the end of last week's show, I alluded to a subject for today and teased that it doesn't rise to the level of expose, and it doesn't. But I was rather insulted by a series of emails I got beginning 2 weeks ago Saturday, Valentine's Day. Had nothing to do with hearts, flowers, or candy. Instead, it was to alert me to the enormous savings available to me during the President's Day sale. The story actually begins well over a decade ago. We got my dad a computer and sort of taught him, how to use it. He didn't really. I thought he'd be in love with digital imagery in as much as his profession was photography, but he never got it. But he also knew that people were doing online trading and investing, so he signed up for a newsletter or two or three, one of which was Martin D. Weiss's Money and Markets. Martin D. Weiss, PhD. Money and Markets is part of the Weiss Group. They rate companies, banks, and forever tell how their forecasts in predicting bad companies' demise is beyond compare. During one visit at my dad's, I sat at his computer. I wanted to give it a tune-up, make sure it wasn't too cluttered, and discovered that he'd had, I don't know how many, maybe several hundred emails from Money and Markets, one a day for a long time. They'd remained unopened. So after getting his permission, I went into his account and redirected the emails come to me. So for, I don't know how long, but it's probably a dozen years or more, I've been getting these daily financial newsletters. Not that I need them. But I have watched, I have read. Essentially, here's the skinny. Each day, 5 days a week, an expert in a particular form of investing writes a column. On Tuesdays, this guy writes about tech stocks. On Mondays, it's Asian markets, another guy on precious metals, and another on currency fluctuations. And truly, it's amazing how expert they are. They are so far ahead of everyone else. At least that's what they tell me. Typically, it's along the lines of, now the trap most investment counselors make. They fall into the trap of believing, and then they start a litany of data streams. And this country is doing that, and that country's central bank is doing this, and it's all wrong, blah, blah, blah. Your eyes will roll. But then at the end, but I know why that's wrong. And then the real kicker. It's possible the world will end financially. But if you know what to do, you may be able to take $10,000 and maybe turn it into $2 million in as little as 5 years, or 3 years, or 10 years. Along with the warning, always gloom and doom, comes the catch. The newsletter is free, but to know the exact strategies, which companies to buy or sell, and when, well, you have to subscribe. And sure, that's fair. That's business. And there are always deals. There are also always new catastrophes just over the horizon, threatening the wealth of those who follow advice from other, not as wise, investment gurus. This isn't a unique strategy. I've seen at least a half a dozen others, all employing the same scary warning. They all purport to have these successes. They all purport to be the best. And of course, as I believe is mandated by law, they always include the disclaimer that no investment is without risk. Now, over the years, this cast of newsletter writers has always been in flux. This one leaves, another one comes in, and of course, he has a track record no one else can match. One left in return. If memory serves, only one has remained a constant. Okay, fine. As I said, that's how the game is played. But back to the President's Day sale. On Saturday the 14th, I got an email from Mike Larson. My memory tells me he's the one who's been there the longest. Now, get a load of this amazingly tantalizing offer. President's Day sale. Save 80%. We're slashing $159 off the regular price of Safe Money Report, but only for the next 72 hours. Click here to lock in your savings now. Then to the body of the letter. Fellow investor, opportunities like this don't come often, if at all. And I may be a bit off my rocker for offering it, but here it goes. For the next 3 days only, I have convinced my publisher to slash the cost for 1 full year of Safe Money Report by 80% for a small group of qualified investors. It can't be that small, else why send to me? I've never invested with him. This may be your one and only chance to get my Safe Money Report service for a full year, a $198 value for just $39. That's a savings of $159, a whopping 80%. Why am I being so generous? Because my gut tells me that once you give my Safe Money Report a try and start getting used to making huge profits, you'll want to stay with us and keep growing your wealth for years to come. Wow, who would not like to get used to making huge profits? A cliche comes to mind. Decisions, decisions, decisions. See, several minutes after I got this terrific offer from Mr. Larson, I got a letter from Larry Edelson. He's the newsletter author whose expertise is precious metals. I think he's also the one who left and returned. His letter said, President's Day sale, save 75%. We're slashing $149 off the regular price of Real Wealth Report, but only for the next 72 hours. Click here to lock in your savings now. Fellow investor, opportunities like this don't come often, if at all. And I may be a bit off my rocker for offering it, but here it goes. For the next 3 days only, I have convinced my publisher to slash the cost for 1 full year of Real Wealth Report, 75%. For a small group of qualified investors. This may be your one and only chance to get my Real Wealth Report for a full year, a $198 value for just $49, a whopping 75%. Why am I being so generous? Because my gut tells me that once you give my Safe Money Report a try and start getting used to making huge profits, you'll want to stay with us and keep growing your wealth for years to come. I won't put them up here, but I got 2 letters on Sunday, one from each of them, and another 2 on President's Day, each apprising me that time was running out, and yes, each day one was identical to the other except for the names and the dollar amounts. To borrow a phrase from Hamlet, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. It is the perfect phrase, and for so many reasons. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. First, there is what is known as the infinite monkey theorem. It states that a monkey hitting keys at random, or a room full of monkeys sometimes, on a typewriter, for an infinite amount of time will almost surely type a given text. The example most often cited is the complete works of William Shakespeare. That's a lot of typing. What it means is, basically, were there an infinite number of monkeys out in the universe, or multiverse, that's the term that's gained cachet, an infinite number of monkeys out there among the billions and billions of galaxies, this infinite number of monkeys given infinite time would almost surely achieve this simply by the enormity of infinity. It's been said, too, by mathematicians, no less, that actually the chance of it happening is extremely low. Except it's not quite zero. So there are several conclusions that we might draw, starting with our guys, Messrs. Larson and Edelson. All right, 3 letters each. That's not exactly got the complexity of Shakespeare's entire works, but still, if they produced even 1 duplicate letter out of any of the 3 days, I think the odds of that would make the lottery look like a good bet, don't you? A second conclusion we might draw, with maybe a slightly better likelihood, is that someone wrote the letters. Of course, someone did, maybe even one of the two gentlemen. But maybe it was an administrative assistant in a cubicle down the hall, and then they each just filled in the respective applicable details. If that's the case, a third conclusion might be that someone wasn't overseeing things. The proverbial left and right hands weren't talking to each other, sort of like the FBI and CIA. Oh wait, they do now. A fourth conclusion we might draw is there is oversight, but that they believe the small group of qualified investors is populated by rubes. And finally, if all is exactly as the letters state, our fifth conclusion must be that Mr. Larson is a better salesman, much more persuasive than Mr. Edelson. After all, Mr. Larson got his small group of qualified investors 80% off, not a measly 75%. You could Google reviews for the gentleman named or for Money in Markets. You may find it interesting. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too. I'd like to remind you again, you can write to us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com and encourage you to subscribe at tinyurl.com/brucechannel. And also encourage you to like and share on Facebook. Okay, this hit me early in the week. I was noodling around trying to decide what movie I was in the mood to watch, and I chose a Michael Douglas movie, Fatal Attraction. It's been long enough ago that I really don't remember what happens in it. That's one of the beauties of a brain not as tightly sealed as it once was. As the old song says, everything old is new again. Anyway, having seen him in more recent things in which he still looks great, it was nevertheless striking to see him once again so young. Because while he looks great, he is 70. And then it hit me. His dad, the iconic legendary actor Kirk Douglas, must be... I looked it up. In December, he turned 98. He was an enormously wide-ranging actor, playing in westerns in Young Man with a Horn, the tortured Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life, the funny sailor in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, in which he sang a sea shanty of sorts. Easy for me to say. He played Marine Colonel Jiggs Casey opposite Burt Lancaster in 7 Days in May, and in my favorite role of his, opposite John Wayne in Harm's Way. He was in over 90 films, far too many to list even just the great ones, the important ones. And it was he who single-handedly ended the shameful blacklisting of the so-called Hollywood 10. As the executive producer of Spartacus, he hired screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, one of those blacklisted. Those 10 could not earn a living plying their craft, but they were guilty of nothing. That time remains a stain on America's history. Oh, sometimes they managed to get a few gigs here and there. It was sort of under the table, and they had to use aliases. Douglas hired Trumbo and used his name, and the blacklisting ended. Kirk Douglas was nominated 3 times for an Academy Award and was presented a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Academy. He was awarded the nation's highest civilian honor, the Medal of Freedom. He's written books, and he's been married to the same woman for 70 years. And he is 98 years old. He suffered a stroke in 1996. He is now rarely seen. There is no one more deserving of a fan's thanks. And as the oldest living member of the American Film Institute's list of the greatest screen legends in American film history. Perhaps the one for whom we should least delay. I'm going to write Kirk Douglas and thank him. The address is Kirk Douglas, Renaissance Literary and Talent, P.O. Box 17379, Beverly Hills, California, 90209. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about the passing of University of North Carolina's legendary coach Dean Smith. His private funeral was held a few days later, and his friends, former players, and even rivals were there. Here's Duke's coach, Mike Krzyzewski, wearing Carolina blue at the funeral. In amazing, amazing irony, UNC's next game was at Duke. Now, if you don't know, first, this is basketball country. Second, there is not a more heated, a bigger rivalry in sport. Well, there are some that are equal. Michigan, Ohio State in football, the Dodgers and the Giants in baseball, the Canadiens and Maple Leafs in hockey come to mind. But none of them surpass UNC versus Duke. Yet before the game, these two arch rivals came together for a long, long moment of silence. There's Coach K, arm in arm with his Tar Heel counterpart, Roy Williams. Williams himself played for Coach Smith, by the way. Notice, too, the Duke player on the left. Yeah, that's a Duke player. Players, coaches, officials from both sides honoring the man, and it was played at Duke, remember. Many of Duke's fans were wearing their dark blue shirts, but with the word Dean written on them. He was a great coach, no question. When he retired, he had more wins than anyone in history at men's Division I-A basketball. In his career as a head coach, he won 76% of his games, but this is better. 97% of his players graduated with a 4-year degree. 1 week ago, 2 weeks after his death was announced, a public memorial was held in the basketball edifice named for him, the Dean Smith Center, although it's more commonly called the Dean Dome. Thousands waited hours in line just for the doors to open. I told you 2 weeks ago that it was he who invented the now universal practice of, after scoring, pointing to the teammate who passed you the ball. At the ceremony's end, everyone in the Dean Dome pointed up at where they expect he is. And that's all for this week, but I hope your upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.